I would like to introduce our first speaker. This speaker was one of the co-founders of Sitecore, a very successful web content management platform turned into an experience platform. And one of the things that I think was very apparent at a company like Sitecore was that from the early days, data was a pivotal piece of their story. In fact, I would say one of the pivotal pieces of their product was the release of a marketing platform that managed and captured data, making sure you could utilize that to serve the customer better. Lars has, I think he has a very humorous way to be able to take us through a data story, a digital story, to help us. So with that, he's, of course, got to be funny now. In fact, there was this, he actually wrote that introduction for me. There was this piece on him saving children and dropping care packages over Syria. I removed that part because the data just didn't back it up at all. So please join me in welcoming Lars Flue Nielsen to the stage.
Thanks, Tim.
You're welcome, man.
Have to be funny, yeah? I didn't know that the audience would be so technical, so I didn't include any tech coding examples up here. Apparently I should have done so. Did all of you understand that, all the examples that he showed? Yeah? And all of you are technical people or not? No? Okay, that's interesting, right? But I think that's common for Tim when he's up here. You know, somebody who resembles Harry Potter so much can do magic to an audience. And thanks, Tim. In fact, I did drop packages onto starving children, so you have to check your facts better. I knew he would be doing a lot of bullshitting here, right? So let me just go in here. They didn't. There's something wrong here with the pasting of the slides. I think it's okay, but the format is not really good. So I had to do an introduction of myself, and normally I hate introductions of myself. Really, people who know me would have never seen me do anything like that, but I just want to give you a bit of context here. So I built this business, Sitecore, with a lot of brilliant people in the company, and that was really a data-driven business. And Sitecore did, in fact, became a unicorn, which is characterized with a business that is worth $1 billion US or more. I left the business a year ago, and I moved on to investing in data-driven businesses, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I've been doing 15 investments in businesses who utilize data, who runs machine learning, AI, etc. A little bit of other technologies as well. I also do consultancy, not because I really need to do consultancy, mostly because I want to spend some time with C-level people in order to help them understand how important data is. Because as Tim said, all of you in this room know how important data is. And since you know how important data is, the question is, will you really succeed? Because you can only succeed with your data journey and becoming a data-driven business if it's anchored all the way throughout all the C-level. And that means every single person, every single C-level person in the organization have to be aware that you want to be a data-driven business, and your board have to be aware that you want to be a data-driven business, and your strategy has to reflect that. And that's why I do consultancy as well, because I try to convince businesses, because that's the biggest problem, really. All the businesses I've met, those who fail, which is the majority of really becoming a data-driven business, happens because it's not anchored well enough into the top of the business. All right. Let's see if we can continue. So I guess this is a dumb question. So what do all of this have in common? Do you think we can have a better slide, better pasting in here? No? Okay, they need to learn how to do that then. Anyway, no, I think it's okay. Let's see if it works out. Otherwise, we see some weird slides up here. So what's common about all these technologies? The commonality about this is, obviously, and I think if you answered anything else on data, then you shouldn't be here today. Obviously, they are data-driven business. They feed data, create massive amounts of data, put it into a data warehouse, and then they process that data using proprietary technologies, visualizations. They run machine learning, unaided, aided machine learning, and try to gather meaning out of it. And the majority of the UI that they use to visualize this data would be applications, very often mobile phones, cell phones, or applications. So that's the data-driven business. But what is really value out of data? How do you get value out of my titles disappear? So really you could say that data, by its essence, is deconstructing legacy businesses. It helps traditional businesses do something different. Now what Tim has been talking about so far has been how do you get insight into the business? And how do you get insight that helps you operate, create a better operations of your business? And that's true. That's one part of machine learning, but machine learning covers other areas as well. It creates new markets. It helps you foresee that you will not be attacked by competitors, cannibalized by businesses who are not competitors, but who would move into a market because they have the data. And they help you create new markets itself. In essence, you could say that the transformation from traditional driven businesses, where you have a supplier chain, then you have your company, then you have your distribution chain, and finally you have the customers, and all of these really are considered different disciplines, is turned into a grid organization, where every single entity in the organization, every single person feeds data into a data warehouse and gather meanings back out of it. And that meaning is not just restricted to their silo of information, but they can get information from other parts of the organization. Look into Nemly. What we can use is the data that we generate based on our customer and how they behave, help the HR Nemly to predict what kind of people they need to hire. In the past, there would always be a reactive process that you had to, in HR or a specific department, would have to discover that we need more people and then hire reactively instead of proactively. It has never been before that you can have HR, understanding the behavior of customers and predict who they need to hire. And that's some of the patterns we start seeing of data-driven businesses. So how do we value data, right? Tim said early on that data in itself really has no meaning, and I agree with him. Data in itself does not have a meaning. But the thing is, if you do not realize that data is gold in the organization, and that if you work with it and make sense of it, then you can create a better business. Then data is worthless. And that's why I said early on that you have to have this anchored at the top of the organization. Everybody in the organization needs to understand that if your data is gold, and you can process that gold, and you can create new markets and create new opportunities for your business. If you do not have that understanding, your company will not worth the data, and therefore you will not get meaning out of it. Then how do you create value out of the data? Well, first of all, you have to stop guessing in your organization, and you have to rely on the data itself. So that means your organization have to put trust into the data rather than their instincts. And that's a big thing to overcome, especially by traditional businesses. I've seen that again and again. People say, that does not, I think it's different. And I would say, yes, but the data really shows something different. And the business would keep on their track, and suddenly that particular business would be cannibalized by competitors who's doing it differently. So that means stop having gut instincts and start relying on the data. There are really three types of data innovation. Operations, that helps you optimize the organization itself. Then customer experience, which helps you understand every step of your customer's journey and help you communicate to the customers at that journey using data, so that that particular customer would have a consistent experience of your brand. At Nemly's case, where I'm chairman of the board, one of the things that we have been working on is trying to bridge that data to every single individual of the organization, so that you would have a consistent message, personalized, based on marketing, the emails that you receive, when you do your browsing on the website or the mobile phone, as you complete your order, you get your delivery at home, and you have a problem, you call customer support. All of that should be one experience where every single step should be a continuous conversation, and that's where you use data. And then you use it for innovation, to innovate new things out of your business. Sometimes you may just gather the data and sell the data. So let's dive quickly into these. I will not bore you to death. I have a lot of cool examples later on. Operations could be employee risk, trying to understand issues management. That could be GDPR. Could be, where are my data? How correct is it? It could be legal. It could be trying to understand, reputations. So early understanding of customer behavior to predict how can we handle the reputation crisis that may come with any business. Customer experience, obviously, trying to understand, are there any gaps in my process? Are we losing the customer somewhere in our journey? Are there somewhere we do not know what the customer is doing? And or can we see that in that process, suddenly customer confidence is dropping? And why is it dropping? Data would show. And finally, innovation, trying to invent new products, trying to change your product. So that kind of intelligence go into the product itself, so you understand, I need to change certain areas and aspects of my product, but it could also be, perhaps I can use this data to create new markets. So let's go to the examples. And I'll start out with something that probably most people know is under disruption, and that's the financial sector. Historically, and that should have been an animation, so it's a little bit annoying. I think you get the point. Historically, you would have big banks, and they would cannibalize and grow their markets by buying smaller banks. Historically, that's what they have been doing. But what have changed within the last 7 years, and that's what they have been doing, by the way, for 50, 60, 100 years, is buying small local banks, growing the market that way. But recently, what has happened is that these businesses is not being disrupted by other banks. They're not being disrupted by smaller banks who grows bigger. Rather, they're being cannibalized on what they can do. Some of the markets, specialists, small businesses specializing in personal loans or business loans or credit risk valuations, small businesses like that would eat away market shares of these big businesses because they didn't use data. And all of these businesses, that's a commonality with all of these businesses up here. And in the financial industry, there are more than 5,000 fintech startups right now, so probably they would also eat into this. The commonality is that they use data and machine learning and AI and use it consistently across the organization. Oh, there we go. That's the animation. Okay, let's try to give a few simple examples, right? If we look at Zest Finance, they say all data is something we use for credit to evaluate the credit risk. Every single data that we have of a person, we put that into the machine learning algorithm, and then we have the machine decide, what the outcome is. So the rule you see up here is not defined by a human. If you uppercase your entire name, you have a higher credit risk than if you spell it out right. Obviously, we can theorize, and you would probably theorize, perhaps a person who make it the right way would have a higher literacy level. Of course. But this is a machine who determined that. And my next question would be, yes, so what's the difference? What's the difference in credit risk for version A, version B? And you wouldn't be able to say so. It's a little bit more, but not that much compared to something else, probably more. But this has more than 2,000 factors they look into. This is one of them. And so they have a high predictability in, evaluating credit risks. Another business is Square. Square is a business who has a small device. Let's say this is mobile phone. You plug it onto the cell phone, and then you can swipe your card. And they grew rapidly in the US, have been moving to other markets as well, because you don't need those clumsy terminals at your store that have to be hardwired. You don't need specific software. All you need to do is have your cell phone, download the app, plug it in, and you're up and running with your small business. No need to say that these guys grew really rapidly in the US. And after a while, the established players, they start to build the same kind of devices. All you need is a cell phone. Now we have the same application. What happened then was that Square dropped the pricing for transactions. And they didn't understand the competitors. How are we going to make money? We are a transaction business. But what really happened was that Square changed the business model based on data in the meantime. What they decided to do was to become a loaning business. They looked at data and they could see that all the small businesses, if they had high success, they would have a lot of transactions. And with a lot of transactions, they would have liquidity problems. Obviously, all small businesses struggle with short-term loans. So they would offer those short-term loans based on the number of transactions. The best thing is that you could board and give that loan dynamically, because you would have insurance that you could actually get your money back because you would have the transactions. And they would also offer to get that money back based on the transactions forward going on itself. So they became a lending business rather than a transaction business. Here's Jumo. It's a South African business. Jumo is an amazing business. They do more than 1 million loans a month, microloans. And what they do is they look at your phone and use all stats, and they enrich that stats with other data sources they can get. So things that they look into is how quickly you type on your cell phone, how often you use takeout, which is an external source, how much power remains on the cell phone when you conduct and submit your application, things like that. And all of that goes in, and they have a really high predictability. In fact, they only experience challenges with 4% of all the lenders. And that's not a loss of 4%, it's just challenges with people not paying at the right time. That's much, much, much lower than any other business, any other banking business in the market. Purely based out of machine learning. Other businesses would be looking into what's your financial income, how much, what kind of, are you a man, female, where do you live, what's different static things, right? And then they would put you into a category. These guys are looking into 10,000 factors and identifying who you are and having a high predictability. So some of you may say, I'm not in finance, so what about beer, right? That's something that is close to my heart, and I know Tim as well, coming from Australia. By the way, you're not really an Australian any longer, Tim. You're saying data? Yeah? In the past, you always said data. It sounds like a small baby crying for the father. Data, data, data. But, so you're actually becoming a Dane. That's incredible. Okay, so anyway, Rate Beer. Anybody know that application? So Rate Beer is an application where you can take pictures of yourself, really popular in the US, right? So I'm in here drinking this beer, love it, and then you rate it. You can see other people, and you know which bar to go to. Really popular application. And you take pictures of yourself, or you sit at the sunset taking a picture, or enjoying this beer, right? What they do is, this application is not owned by a startup. It's actually owned by AB InBev, which is one of the largest breweries on the world. They're owning a lot of breweries. And so what they're doing is they use it to understand what kind of beer people are looking for, where and when, what they like. And they analyze the pictures, by the way, which is really cool, right? So they get meaning out of the pictures. So they could say, people who likes this beer are people who sits in the sunset, right? So we should, next time we do a marketing campaign, that should be the picture, right? Or this beer is really suitable for groups of people being really drunk because all the pictures is really drunk, really smiling, one fur coat in the corner, but still really, really good businesses. So they use that data. And other businesses doing the same. If we look at Amazon, Goodreads is a same kind of ecosystem for people reading books. Most of you would know IMDb, also owned by Amazon. Twitch is a similar gaming platform, right? So they use this to understand who you are, what your interest is, and they enrich that and sell more. What about other industries? We know that the car industry is going to be disrupted. And everybody's talking, whenever I mention cars, people are saying, yes, because cars, they would be autonomous. They can drive on themselves, and that's going to change. Yes, that's true, but the biggest change is really that cars provides as much data as cell phones does. So the car would know, first of all, obviously, there would be static fields, knowing, do I need to buy gas? So you can sell that data to gas stations, who caused the accident, so you can sell that kind of information, because you have the sensors, the cameras, everything, sell it to the insurance company, who would be able to determine immediately whose fault it was. Machines could even decide who was faulty. Would the driver be tired? Can we sell to hotels, etc.? That's data, but they also know other things. One of the interesting things, by the way, here is really that the price of producing a car is really high, and the margin is low. So it's a high-risk business. But what if you could start using that data? Because you can sell data every second of the day, and the margin is extremely high. So they have a huge opportunity. The question is, who by the end of the day will own it? Will it be the car industry, or would it be the cell phone industry, mobile provider industry, who sell this data? So, and what prevents these guys from moving into other industries? So if we look into the insurance industry, if the car knows how you drive and brake, if you're aggressive, it knows also physical factors, what state the car is in. They know the location, the weather, so it can really start giving you much more precise predictions on how often you do, accidents. So why wouldn't this industry start moving into the insurance space? And I even see, in short, and I know, by the way, that it's likely that they will. And I think what's interesting is really that what we'll see in future is insurances that would also help you adjust your driving skills, right? So they would go in and say, well, you're driving too fast in this area. Your insurance has just gone up with $1. Here's another $1, and here's another $1, because you're driving crazy, right? And when you start, driving more sane, becoming a better driver, price would drop. So it would help also adjust, and it's really a win-win situation. Physical devices as well at home. Anybody has a vacuum cleaner, robotic vacuum cleaner? No? A few? Yeah? I have as well. And the first edition I had was just driving erratically. The next one I had would drive into the center of the room, turn around a few times as it was really confused, and they would drive in straight lines. Perfect cleaning, really smart, right? I have a Nito, which not this particular one. The thing is that what they're really doing is they create a map of your house, and this is to the outer right is actually a map of my house that is generated for me and sent to the business, who can then sell that data to whoever they like. And the thing is that they can analyze all kinds of stuff out of this picture, right? They can predict where, if I always had the white dots in the center, that's stuff that is in the room that it couldn't drive by, right? And you see that all kinds of small dots out there. Any idea what that could be? Yes, it's chairs, right? So if you can see it, a computer can see it too. So it can actually look into how big is the house, how big would the house be. It can tell you how many furnitures do you have, how often do you drop stuff on your floor, because they can look from map to map, and then they can predict if you are a messy person or a tidy person. So it can do all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay, let's go to something that is an industry that people wouldn't usually think is very digitalized. This is the farming industry, actually more those who do livestock, right? Can you have farming that is data-driven? Of course you can, because right now when you have livestock, what you do is you feed it with food that has antibiotics in it, and that means that all of us is eating antibiotics, and some of us would get resistant, and some of us would move into organic food, which is really expensive to produce, because when you do organic food, you have to every day check every single cow, because you cannot slaughter or produce milk out of an organic, cow which would be ill. So what they're doing is they're putting sensors in. Oops, that's one too many. Yeah. So what they're doing is they are putting sensors into the ears of these cows, and they measure where the cows is moving about. They know if the cow has been to the watering trough and drinking or eating food, and they know how long it has been on the field. They also know if it starts moving weirdly, then it would be ill, and they can even predict what kind of disease it would have, looking at the body temperature. So what they're doing now is they are only medicating the animals that need so, which means you can have an organic and an unorganic business at the same time. And you can even sell this data. So you can sell premium antibiotic milk, and it's actually cheaper to produce because you don't have to feed them with antibiotics, which is expensive. Traditional markets that are using data. Of course, data is not always easy to understand. And so let's see, how can you actually get to this? Because data is, you can torture data, and you can beat data, and you can kick data until it tells you exactly what you want to hear. And so I'm pretty confident that there's no correlation between how much margarine people are eating and how many people are divorced in Maine. So you can actually get any data, any meaning out of the data you want. So how do you get started with that data-driven journey? Well, first, you have to define a data strategy in your organization. And that's, as I said earlier on, your company strategy has to reflect, yes, we want to be a data-driven business. That means you have to involve the C-level, not just the CIO, or if you're lucky enough and big enough, you have a chief data officer, but the CEO, CTO, all of them have to be part of that journey. And the board has to have at least one member who's a data-driven person. And your data strategy, whenever you do something in return, you have to help complete your business organization's goals. You cannot just build your own data things, and which may help the business but not really complete their goal. And the thing is, all data is important because you don't know what you don't know. I'm probably a little bit late. Yeah? Tim said I could spend a few. Yeah. Okay. It's just waving. Go ahead. I know you're late always. So you need all the data, and you can only do that by collecting all the data into one data warehouse and connecting the data. So the data needs to be connected, otherwise you cannot holistically see over the course of, for example, a customer experience. When I'm out, the challenges that I experience with businesses there are three major challenges. First challenge is that the data strategy is not aligned with the C-level. And you can only overcome that if you are part of the data team, or you run the data team, or the initiative. You can only overcome that by boarding your CEO. They need to understand how important it is, because if they don't, they would be disrupted by other businesses. And you can only do that by getting people like myself, and I know there's a few people in the group, I know them, who can go in and convince the C-level that's what they need to do. If you cannot get the C-level on board and get a complete buy-in, you will never become strategic in the organization. So that's really, really important. And I know it's frustrating. I know many of you are thinking, how can I do that? And it will come over time. As the business starts getting hurt, it will gradually turn into more and more data-driven business. The second thing I see is connecting the data and actually collecting the data first and then connecting it into one data center is something that takes time. And then connecting the data so it makes sense is almost impossible. You would start with a few data sources and then most businesses end there. You would not see a full maturity where everybody has all data very often in the organization. The last thing is, once you've done that, then you understand that your data consistency and your data quality, it sucks, right? You're down to low grade, as Tim said early on. You have invalid data that is incorrect. So you have to clean that up, and usually that's a very time-consuming task. Fortunately, there are tools that help you do this. This is just one of the tools that helps you become a data-driven organization. So it all starts with a business understanding. And to get a business understanding, if you really want to convince your C-level, you have to come up with a concrete solution, something drastic you can solve in your organization by using data. The next 3 items, 2, 3, and 4, is basically about fixing the data, getting it connected and collected and connected. And then there's a lot of stuff in this where you have to understand the data, try to get sense of it, and try to attach it together, and then model it to see if it makes sense. Now, I've promised myself never to go in and vet any vendor at any, whenever I'm invited out as a speaker, so I'm not going to do that today, but I will say that, fortunately, there are tools out there that can do that today. 3 years ago, there were no tools. But now there are actually tools who can help you do this and minimize number 2, 3, and 4, which is the most boring and costly thing of that entire journey. No data scientist, there's a lot of data scientists in here, thinks it's fun to do data cleaning. No data scientist thinks it's fun to try to stitch the data together. They want to do something out of it. So that's, the time-consuming things. I really have nothing else. So my time is up. I'll be hanging around here most of the day. So if you want to ask me anything, feel free to do so. Thank you.